Introduction. Have you ever wondered which once essential technologies have quietly vanished from our lives? From devices that revolutionized the way we worked, played, and connected to gadgets we now barely remember. These are the tools that once shaped our world and now exist only in memory. Join us as we explore 15 technologies that became useless and discover the stories behind them. Floppy disks. In the quiet rhythm of technological evolution, there was a time when the humble floppy disk carried the weight of digital progress. Its thin, flexible body held only a fraction of what today fits into a single image on a modern smartphone. Yet for an entire generation it represented possibility. The soft clicking sound of a computer reading the disk became a familiar note in the early symphony of personal computing. And for many years, its modest capacity was enough to hold documents, programs, and the first digital memories created by ordinary people. The floppy disk appeared in the early 1970s, a period when computers were shifting from industrial machines into something closer to personal companions. It offered a way to store information outside the main device, to carry it from one place to another, and to archive it for later. Even its physical presence inspired a sense of importance. The protective sleeve, the square shape, the metal shutter that slid open with every use. These small details created a ritual around handling data. It made the digital world feel tangible. As the decade turned into the 1980s, the floppy disk became a standard feature in homes, offices, and schools. People stored homework assignments, financial reports, and early forms of entertainment on these fragile pieces of plastic. The 5.25-inch version, with its bendable surface, soon gave way to the smaller and sturdier 3.5-inch disk. It felt like a step toward refinement. More compact, more durable, and easier to carry. The label on the front became a tiny canvas of organization, handwritten titles marking the personal archives of everyday life. For many users, the floppy disk was their first experience with removable storage. It shaped the early habits of digital organization, saving, backing up, copying, labeling. It offered a sense of control during a time when computers were still unfamiliar to most people. Despite its vulnerability to magnets, dust, and wear, the floppy disk became a trusted tool, a bridge between human intention and machine memory. But technological progress moved steadily forward, and the limitations of floppy disks began to reveal themselves. Their capacity, once seen as generous, struggled to keep up with growing file sizes. High-resolution images, software installations, and multimedia projects became too large to fit on a single disk. The rise of CD-ROMs in the 1990s marked the beginning of the end. Optical media could store hundreds of times more information, rendering the floppy insufficient for an era of expanding digital needs. Yet even as it faded from mainstream use, the floppy disk did not disappear immediately. It remained a comforting fallback, a familiar tool that refused to vanish overnight. Many schools and offices continued to rely on it, not out of necessity but out of habit. For a while, computers still included floppy drives as a symbolic gesture, a final acknowledgement of the technology that helped shape the early personal computing landscape. Eventually, new forms of memory replaced it entirely. USB drives, compact and resilient, offered vast storage in a form that could fit on a keychain. Cloud services made it possible to store information without any physical object at all. And as the digital world expanded, the floppy disk quietly transitioned from a practical tool into a symbol of nostalgia. In modern interfaces, its shape remains embedded as the universal save icon, a reminder of a time when saving a file meant inserting a real object into a computer. The legacy of the floppy disk lives in the habits it helped establish. It taught millions of people how to interact with digital information, how to preserve it, and how to carry it from place to place. Its simplicity guided an early generation through the first steps of a new technological era. Though its physical form has long since become obsolete, its influence remains woven into the history of computing. And as we look back, it becomes clear that the floppy disk was more than a storage device. It was a gentle beginning, a small but essential chapter in the story of how technology became part of everyday life. Fax machines. In the slow and steady movement of technological history, Few devices shaped modern communication as quietly yet as decisively as the fax machine. For decades, it stood at the crossroads between the physical and the digital, transmitting documents across great distances through a network of invisible signals. The soft humming of its internal rollers, the mechanical warmth of printing paper, and the faint static of a connection being established created a rhythm that became part of the soundscape of offices around the world. To many people, the fax machine was more than a tool. It was a symbol of reliability during a transition into a new era of information exchange. The idea behind the fax machine emerged long before it became a household or office staple. Its earliest conceptual ancestors appeared in the 19th century, when scientists and inventors imagined ways to send images over telegraph lines. But it wasn't until the second half of the 20th century that the fax machine entered everyday life. The moment it did, it changed the pace of communication. It allowed businesses to share contracts, signatures, diagrams, and reports in minutes rather than days. The machine stood proudly next to office phones and typewriters, forming a triad of essential tools that defined the modern workspace. By the 1980s and 1990s, the fax machine had reached its peak. Every office had one, and many homes did too. It created a sense of immediacy that mail could never provide. A document could be signed, placed in the feeder, and sent halfway across the world to another machine ready to print it on the other side. It was a technology that brought people closer together, not through sound or sight, but through the exchange of written and printed information. And despite its mechanical limitations, it carried with it a certain sense of formality. A fax felt official, urgent, tangible. The operation of the fax machine relied on a simple but clever mechanism. As the paper slowly moved through the device, a sensor scanned each line of the document, converting its shades into electrical impulses. These impulses traveled through phone lines at a steady pace, where another machine interpreted the signal and reconstructed the image. It was a physical journey translated into electronic form, a merging of the analog and the digital, long before the internet became commonplace. Each transmission carried a sense of trust that the machine would interpret every line correctly and that the recipient would have an exact copy of what was sent. For many years, the fax machine held its place as the backbone of business communication. Banks, hospitals, government agencies, and law firms relied heavily on it. Its printed receipts and confirmation pages offered reassurance that a message had been delivered. In a world that was only beginning to understand computers, the fax machine provided a familiar, paper-based certainty. It did not require computer skills, passwords, or file conversions. It only required a sheet of paper and a phone number. But as the new century approached, the landscape of communication began to change. Email, digital signatures, scanners, and secure file-sharing services brought a level of efficiency and clarity that fax machines could not match. Messages became faster, clearer, and easier to organize. Documents no longer needed to be printed and scanned through noisy rollers. They could be sent as clean digital files, free from smudges and distortions. The fax machine, once a symbol of professionalism, slowly began to feel outdated. Yet its decline was not sudden. Many industries continued to use fax machines long after the rise of digital communication. Some did so due to regulations. Others did so out of habit. The familiar sound of a fax line connecting remained an echo of an earlier time, a reminder of the period when this machine represented the height of efficiency. For a while, fax numbers were still printed on business cards, and fax confirmations were still clipped into files as proof of communication. Eventually, the rhythm of the modern world changed enough that the fax machine could no longer keep pace. Offices removed them to make space for newer devices. Long-distance fax lines fell silent. And as digital workflows became universal, the once essential machine faded into the background. Today, it exists mostly as a nostalgic memory or a legal formality in a few remaining sectors. Its presence, once so widespread, has diminished to a quiet whisper of the past. Yet its legacy persists. The fax machine marked a turning point in how people exchanged information. It bridged the gap between paper and digital communication and carried businesses through a transformative era. Its long service taught the world how to share documents quickly and reliably. And though it no longer stands in every office, It remains an important chapter in the story of technological progress. A chapter defined by steady lines of transmitted ink and the soft hum of a machine connecting distant places. MP3 players. In the quiet shift between two technological eras, the MP3 player emerged as a device that changed how people carried and experienced music. Before it appeared, listening on the go meant dealing with magnetic tapes, spinning disks, or bulky portable players that required physical media. The MP3 player arrived with a different philosophy. It removed the weight of objects and replaced it with the weightless form of digital sound. For the first time, entire music collections could be stored inside a device small enough to fit into a pocket, and this simple idea reshaped everyday habits around the world. The technology behind MP3 files opened the door for the revolution. Engineers discovered a method to compress audio by removing frequencies the human ear barely notices, dramatically reducing the size of each song. What once required a shelf full of disks could now live inside a small device powered by a single battery. Early MP3 players were simple, often with monochrome screens and limited controls, but they carried a sense of novelty. They invited people to choose their own soundtrack wherever they went, without shuffling disks or rewinding tapes. Felt like freedom captured in digital form. As the years progressed, MP3 players became more refined. They gained larger capacities, brighter screens, and more intuitive interfaces. Many people remember the smooth click wheels, the simple menus, and the gentle rhythm of scrolling through song lists. Creating playlists became a personal ritual, a way to craft moods and moments. For runners, students, travelers, and commuters, the MP3 player became a quiet companion. It provided privacy in crowded places and offered a moment of escape in the flow of everyday life. The cultural impact of the MP3 player spread quickly. Music no longer depended on physical distribution. Listeners could download songs from the internet, organize them on a computer, and transfer them directly to the device. This change altered the relationship between artists, industries, and audiences. It shifted music from a fixed product to a fluid digital file. At the same time, it made listening deeply personal. A single device, connected to a pair of headphones, became an intimate doorway into a private world of rhythm and sound. Despite its influence, the MP3 player existed in a world that continued to evolve. As mobile phones gained new features and storage capabilities, they slowly began to absorb the role of dedicated music devices. Early smartphones could hold a handful of songs, but each generation expanded their capacity and refined their software. Soon, people realized they no longer needed to carry two separate devices. The convenience of having communication, apps, photos, and music in a single object became irresistible. The standalone MP3 player, once essential, started to feel unnecessary. Streaming services added a final shift. Instead of managing files, users could now open an app and access millions of songs instantly. Playlists updated themselves, recommendations adapted to personal tastes, and music became a continuous flow rather than a curated collection. The MP3 player, built around the idea of owning and carrying specific files, could not compete with this new model. Its design, elegant and focused, belonged to an era that was already fading. Yet the MP3 player does not disappear from memory. It remains a symbol of a simpler digital age, when people carefully organized folders of music and took pride in their personal libraries. Many remember the tactile feeling of selecting songs, the satisfaction of filling the device with albums one by one, and the quiet presence of the player in daily routines. It became a part of adolescence for some, a travel companion for others, and a gateway to personal discovery through sound. Today, the MP3 player rests in a gentle twilight of nostalgia. It is rarely used, yet fondly remembered. Museums of technology display early models as landmarks of digital culture. Some people still keep their old players in drawers, not for practical reasons but as reminders of moments when music felt newly portable and deeply personal. Its influence lives on in modern devices, in streaming platforms, and in the idea that music is something to be carried effortlessly through life. Although time has moved forward, leaving the MP3 player behind, its legacy remains clear. It marked a pivotal moment when the world shifted from physical media to digital sound. It taught people how to build personal soundtracks and how to integrate music into every part of their day. And even now, as technology continues to advance, the quiet significance of the MP3 player endures, a reflection of the early digital age and the first step toward the boundless world of music we know today. VHS tapes. In the gentle unfolding of technological history, VHS tapes hold a special place as one of the first bridges that brought cinematic experiences into the home. Long before digital files, streaming platforms, and compact discs, these large rectangular cassettes carried stories, memories, and moving images in a form that felt almost physical. To watch a film meant pressing a button, hearing the soft mechanical click inside the cassette, and listening to the slow whir of magnetic tape winding through a player. It was a ritual that shaped the experience as much as the content itself. VHS, or Video Home System, emerged in the late 1970s and soon became a defining technology of the 1980s and 1990s. It arrived during a time when television was the central medium of entertainment but lacked the ability to record or replay programs at will. The VHS tape changed that completely. It allowed people to capture broadcasts, rewatch favorite shows, and bring rented movies into their living rooms. For the first time, the world of film felt personal and accessible. A movie no longer belonged only to theaters or scheduled broadcasts. It could sit quietly on a shelf, ready to play whenever the viewer wished. The design of the VHS cassette contributed to its familiarity. The textured plastic, the transparent window showing the reels inside, and the soft weight of the tape created a tactile relationship with media. Labels were handwritten, often with titles squeezed into narrow spaces or covered with stickers from rental stores. These small details turned each tape into a personal artifact. Families built collections that reflected their tastes and memories. Children memorized the covers of their favorite films, and marathon nights often ended with a tape gently rewinding itself before being placed back into its case. Inside every VHS tape lay a long stretch of magnetic film, carrying video and audio encoded as tiny variations in magnetism. When the tape moved across the heads of a VCR, those variations transformed back into images and sound. The process was mechanical and imperfect. Slight distortions, soft lines, or subtle flickers often appeared on the screen. Yet these imperfections became part of the charm. They gave each copy a unique character and made watching a VHS tape feel like an encounter with something real, not just a file or stream. As VHS gained popularity, an entire culture grew around it. Rental stores became community landmarks, offering rows of films arranged by genre, with bright covers designed to catch the eye. People browsed aisles, reading summaries on the back of each case, searching for something new to watch. Bringing home a stack of tapes for a weekend became a familiar ritual, one that blended anticipation with a sense of comfort. VHS changed not only how people consumed media, but how they engaged with entertainment outside the home. But while VHS dominated for many years, the technology carried inherent limitations. Picture quality was modest, tapes degraded with time, and rewinding or fast-forwarding required patience. The bulkiness of cassettes demanded physical storage space, and repeated playback slowly wore down the magnetic film. As digital technology advanced, these constraints became more noticeable. The arrival of DVD in the late 1990s marked a major transition. With higher resolution, faster navigation, and no magnetic wear, DVDs offered an upgraded experience that VHS could not match. The shift away from VHS was steady and inevitable. Rental stores replaced their shelves with discs, new films stopped arriving on tape, and VCR manufacturers gradually halted production. Homes that once displayed rows of cassettes began to trade them for slim optical cases. Over time, VHS tapes were packed into boxes, donated, or left behind as remnants of an earlier era. Streaming services and digital downloads later accelerated the change, making physical media feel almost unnecessary. Yet VHS did not vanish without leaving a deep imprint on culture. It democratized video consumption, introduced the idea of home movie collections, and preserved countless family memories through camcorder recordings. Many birthdays, vacations, and childhood moments live on today through VHS tapes stored in closets and attics. Though the color may fade and the footage may wobble slightly, These recordings hold a sense of authenticity that digital formats rarely replicate. Now, VHS tapes stand as gentle artifacts of the analog age. They remind us of evenings spent rewinding films before returning them to stores, of the quiet patience required to navigate through scenes, and of the tactile connection people once had with the media they loved. Their presence may have diminished, but their influence persists in the habits and expectations of modern viewers. VHS tapes helped shape an era when stories were carried on magnetic threads, and when the simple act of pressing play felt like opening a doorway into another world. Payphones. In the quiet memory of public spaces, payphones remain as still reminders of a time when communication depended on proximity, patience, and the presence of a metal booth on a street corner. For decades, these simple machines connected cities, guided travelers, and carried the voices of millions across the world. Long before mobile phones dissolved the boundary between distance and immediacy, the payphone offered a structured, almost ceremonial way of reaching out. A person stepped inside the booth, closed the glass door behind them, and lifted the cold receiver to call someone far away. In those moments, the world felt both smaller and more deliberate. Payphones emerged in the early 20th century, as telephone networks expanded and public communication became an essential service. They appeared in train stations, hotel lobbies, airports, and quiet street corners, offering a sense of reassurance to anyone far from home. The design of the payphone reflected practicality: a sturdy metal frame, a numbered keypad, a coin slot, and a receiver attached by a heavy cord. Each part served a purpose, built to withstand countless hands and years of weather. The booth surrounding the phone created a small pocket of privacy in the middle of busy urban life. For many people, payphones were not just devices, they were lifelines. Travelers used them to confirm schedules, workers checked in with their families, and friends arranged to meet before the age of instant messaging. The sound of coins clinking into the slot became a familiar prelude to connection. A brief pause followed, then a dial tone that signaled the line was ready. Conversations were often short and focused, shaped by the cost of each minute. Yet despite their brevity, these calls carried a weight that reflected the careful thought behind them. Throughout the 1960s, 70s, and 80s, payphones became woven into the fabric of everyday life. Cities maintained networks with thousands of units, each tied to the larger telephone system that stretched across countries. Emergency calls, last-minute updates, and unexpected moments of need all passed through payphones. Their presence brought structure to communication, offering a dependable point of contact in a world that relied heavily on schedules and arrangements. They represented a balance between independence and connection, allowing anyone with a few coins to reach someone they cared about. Despite their importance, payphones operated within clear limitations. They required physical presence and acceptable weather conditions. Calls lacked mobility and required planning. The booth itself became a small refuge during storms, yet it was also subject to vandalism and wear. As society moved faster and more people demanded flexibility, these constraints began to feel restrictive. The world was shifting toward portable communication, and the payphone could not adapt to that change. The turning point arrived with the rise of mobile phones. Early models were expensive and bulky, but they offered something that payphones could not: the freedom to call from anywhere. As coverage expanded and devices became more affordable, the reliance on public phones started to decline. Slowly at first, people walked past payphones without noticing them. Then, as mobile phones became standard, the booths began to stand empty. Calls that once echoed inside glass enclosures now traveled wirelessly, carried effortlessly through the air. Cities responded by removing unused units, and companies gradually shut down maintenance services. Payphones faded into the background, their once constant presence reduced to a scatter of forgotten booths. Some were converted into Wi-Fi stations, small libraries, or decorative elements. Others remained untouched, as quiet relics along sidewalks where they once served countless calls. In many places, the last payphones stand as monuments to a way of communicating that required intention and physical interaction. Yet their legacy endures. Payphones remind us of a time when communication carried a ritualistic quality. The act of stepping into the booth, choosing a number, and hearing the distant ring created a moment of pause, a contrast to the seamless flow of modern messaging. They were markers of safety for travelers, points of contact during emergencies, and symbols of connection in eras defined by distance. Their disappearance reflects a profound shift in how society interacts, revealing how quickly technology transforms even the most familiar habits. Today, payphones hold a quiet place in collective memory. They belong to the landscape of old films, childhood recollections, and city streets that once depended on them. Though they no longer play a central role in communication, they continue to represent a period when every call required intention and every connection felt meaningful. The payphone story is one of gradual fading, yet its presence remains woven into the history of how people once reached out across the world. GPS navigators. In the steady evolution of personal technology, standalone GPS navigators held a brief but significant moment when they defined how people moved through the world. Before smartphones absorbed their purpose, these compact devices sat quietly on dashboards, guiding drivers with calm digital voices and glowing maps. They entered everyday life at a time when navigation still depended on folded paper maps, printed directions, and a sense of intuition. The GPS navigator shifted that experience, turning travel into a precise and guided journey shaped by satellites orbiting silently overhead. The foundation of the GPS navigator lay in the Global Positioning System, a network of satellites maintained high above the Earth. By measuring signals from multiple satellites at once, the device could calculate its exact location on the planet's surface. Early units translated these coordinates into simple arrows and distances, but as technology matured, the screens gained detail, color, and complexity. Roads, highways, landmarks, and estimated arrival times appeared at a glance. For the first time, anyone could travel to unfamiliar places without relying on memory or written instructions. Throughout the early 2000s, GPS navigators became essential tools for drivers. They brought clarity to long road trips, helped commuters find alternate routes, and offered reassurance during moments of uncertainty. The devices mounted on windshields or dashboards, connected to power ports, and updated their maps through downloadable files or physical memory cards. The soft glow of the display illuminated the interior of cars during late-night drives, creating a sense of calm direction even in the most unfamiliar environments. For many people, the GPS navigator represented a quiet revolution. It eliminated the anxiety of getting lost and transformed travel into a predictable experience. It calculated routes, predicted delays, and adapted to changes with gentle prompts to turn left or right. Families depended on it during vacations. Delivery drivers used it to locate addresses with newfound accuracy. The device erased the hesitation that once accompanied navigating large cities or remote highways. It gave structure to movement and allowed journeys to unfold with smooth and reliable guidance. Despite its convenience, the GPS navigator existed within a limited ecosystem. It required updates to remain accurate, and those updates were often infrequent or costly. Roads changed, intersections shifted, and new developments appeared faster than some devices could adapt. Screens were small, buttons slightly rigid, and the stored memory of each unit provided only a fraction of what would later become standard in smartphones. Yet for many years, these limitations were accepted as part of the technology's rhythm, and the device remained trusted and widely used. The turning point arrived with the rapid advancement of mobile phones. As smartphones grew more capable, they began to integrate built-in GPS technology alongside detailed digital maps. Apps offered real-time traffic conditions, instant rerouting, and constantly updated geographic data. The convenience of having navigation inside a single device removed the need for a separate gadget on the dashboard. The smartphone became a universal tool, merging communication, entertainment, and navigation into one object that people carried everywhere. With each technological leap, standalone GPS navigators lost their significance. Software updates for phones were automatic and frequent. Routes adapted instantly to accidents or road closures. Voice guidance improved, maps gained precision, and the user experience became smoother. Drivers who once relied on dedicated GPS units gradually set them aside, recognizing that the device in their pocket could accomplish far more with less effort. Over time, GPS navigators moved from essential tools to forgotten accessories stored in drawers or glove compartments. Their decline was quiet but steady. Manufacturers reduced production, and stores began to focus on smartphone accessories instead. Car dashboards no longer required clamps or suction cups for navigation devices. The once ubiquitous GPS unit faded into the background as a short-lived chapter in the journey towards smarter, more integrated technology. Yet their impact remains traceable in the habits people formed, habits of trusting digital guidance, following satellite-informed routes, and relying on precise data to move through the world. Today, standalone GPS navigators exist mostly as remnants of an early digital era. They remind us of a time when navigation technology felt specialized and separate, when traveling with digital assistance required carrying a dedicated device. Their gentle voices and pixelated maps evoke memories of long drives guided by a glowing screen, of journeys shaped by a technology that made the world feel more organized and accessible. Although their relevance has faded, the GPS navigator remains an important step in the evolution of digital navigation. It introduced the idea that the world could be mapped, measured, and explored through the guidance of satellites. And even now, as smartphones handle nearly all aspects of modern travel, the legacy of the standalone GPS device quietly endures, a reflection of the moment when technology first began to lead us through the roads of the world with certainty and calm direction. Portable DVD players. In the early 2000s, portable DVD players felt like a small miracle. They arrived at a time when people were still getting used to the idea of carrying digital entertainment with them. These devices were compact, foldable, and equipped with a screen that opened like a tiny laptop. For many travelers, especially families on long car trips, they became a trusted companion. You could insert a disc, press play, and instantly bring movies into cars, airplanes, and hotel rooms. They offered a kind of freedom that felt new, a quiet escape from the world through a familiar film, all contained within a single device. For a few years, portable DVD players held real significance. They bridged the gap between physical media and the growing desire for mobility. Before streaming existed, before smartphones could hold entire libraries of content, these players served as a portable cinema. Their simple interface, long-lasting batteries, and durable plastic shells made them accessible to almost anyone. Even the limitations, like carrying a stack of discs, felt normal in a world that hadn't yet imagined the convenience of instant digital access. But as technology advanced, the shift happened gradually and then all at once. First came the rise of laptops with DVD drives, offering bigger screens and more versatility. Then the emergence of digital downloads changed everything. Suddenly, a movie no longer needed a physical disc. It could exist as a file stored on a computer. And soon after, streaming services reshaped entertainment entirely. They removed the need for any hardware beyond a single connected device. With a stable internet connection, an entire world of films was accessible without inserting anything at all. At the same time, portable devices became more compact and multifunctional. Tablets arrived with bright displays, intuitive touchscreens, and the ability to store or stream hours of content. Smartphones grew larger, sharper, and more capable. Families who once packed bags filled with DVDs now needed only a charger and a few apps. As convenience expanded, the idea of carrying a dedicated disc player began to feel outdated. The limitations of portable DVD players became more noticeable with time. The screens were small and often prone to glare. Battery life, while once impressive, could not compete with modern devices that were designed for all-day use. And the reliance on physical discs made it difficult to adapt to a world shifting rapidly toward digital formats. Each advancement in mobile technology placed these players further into the background. Today, portable DVD players still exist, but mostly in niche spaces, road trips with very young children, older households that still rely on physical discs, or collectors who enjoy the sense of nostalgia. They represent a transitional era in entertainment, a moment when technology first began to escape the boundaries of the living room. Holding one now feels like touching a piece of history, a reminder of the early steps toward portable media that shaped the path to the devices we use today. As streaming dominates modern viewing habits, the portable DVD player remains a quiet artifact of a simpler technological moment. It symbolizes a time when mobility meant carrying discs in a sleeve and unfolding a small screen to create a private world. Though no longer essential, it left behind an important legacy, the idea that entertainment could follow us anywhere, long before the world was ready to make it effortless. Digital cameras. Digital cameras emerged at a time when the world was beginning to rethink what photography could be. For decades, taking a picture meant dealing with film rolls, darkrooms, and the careful limits of how many exposures were left. When digital cameras appeared, they offered something transformative. The ability to capture moments instantly, review them on a small screen, and store hundreds of images without ever touching a piece of film. For many people, this shift felt almost magical. Photography became more accessible, more spontaneous, and more deeply woven into everyday life. Throughout the late 1990s and early 2000s, digital cameras evolved at a remarkable pace. Early models were bulky and simple, but each new generation brought sharper sensors, faster processors, and improved displays. Families used them to document vacations, birthdays, and small milestones. Travelers carried compact cameras to capture landscapes and city streets. Even professional photographers began adopting higher-end digital models that could match or surpass film in clarity and detail. The entire culture of how people recorded their lives started changing. Photos became immediate, easy to share, and no longer limited by physical film. The rise of digital cameras also transformed how memories were stored. Instead of keeping envelopes of printed photos, people began organizing images into folders on computers. Memory cards replaced film cartridges, and the idea of deleting pictures instantly to make space for new ones became completely normal. This new flexibility encouraged experimentation. People took more photos, tried more angles, and captured everyday moments that might have seemed too ordinary for film. Photography shifted from an occasional activity into a constant companion. Yet this golden era had a surprisingly short lifespan. As smartphones improved, the need for a separate camera started to fade. Early phone cameras were simple, but the convenience of always having a camera in your pocket was impossible to ignore. Over time, phone manufacturers invested heavily in camera technology, adding multiple lenses, night modes, computational enhancements, and editing tools built directly into the device. Smartphones didn't just compete with digital cameras. They reshaped the entire idea of photography. By the 2010s, the shift became clear. People began choosing convenience over specialization. A smartphone could take a picture, edit it instantly, store thousands of images, and share them within seconds. Digital cameras, once revolutionary, started to feel limited. They required separate chargers, cables, and memory cards. Photos had to be transferred manually. Their screens felt small and outdated next to high-resolution touch displays. The everyday tasks that digital cameras once excelled at were now handled effortlessly by a single all-purpose device. As a result, entire segments of the digital camera market collapsed. Compact point-and-shoot cameras, once incredibly popular, saw their sales decline rapidly. Only specialized areas, such as professional photography, wildlife, and high-end hobbyist work, continued to rely on dedicated cameras. These models remained powerful and innovative, but they served a much narrower audience. For most people, the smartphone fully replaced the need for a separate photographic device. Today, digital cameras live in a space shaped by nostalgia and niche passion. They remind us of a transitional moment in technology, when the world moved from film to pixels and photography became truly democratic. Holding one now brings back memories of the early excitement, of tiny LCD screens, blinking battery icons, and the satisfying sound of a shutter clicking on a device made solely for capturing moments. Although they are no longer essential to everyday life, digital cameras played an important role in shaping modern photography. They taught people how to see the world through a digital lens long before smartphones refined the process. Their legacy continues quietly, preserved in photo albums, hard drives, and countless memories created during the years when a small camera worn on a strap was the most modern tool a person could carry. Personal digital assistants. In the early 1990s, when computers were still large, heavy machines kept mostly on desks, a new idea began to take shape: an idea that personal organization, information storage, and digital communication could be carried in the palm of a hand. That idea became the PDA, the personal digital assistant. These devices arrived long before smartphones, at a time when carrying a computer in your pocket felt almost futuristic. For many people, PDAs were their first experience with truly mobile technology, a first glimpse into a world where information could follow them everywhere. PDAs were designed with a simple purpose: to help people manage their lives. They stored contacts, calendars, notes, and task lists, all displayed on small monochrome screens. Early models relied on a stylus, allowing users to tap through menus or write directly on the screen using special shorthand systems. The experience was unlike anything else available at the time. Instead of flipping through paper planners or carrying bundles of documents, individuals had a digital companion that stayed quiet, organized, and always within reach. As the years progressed, PDAs became more advanced. They introduced wireless syncing, allowing users to connect them to desktop computers. They added infrared ports for transferring small files between devices. Some models included early email functions, letting people send brief messages long before mobile internet became a standard feature. Companies like Palm, Handspring, and later Microsoft with its Pocket PC line helped shape an entirely new category of personal technology. For business travelers, students, doctors, and professionals of all kinds, PDAs became essential tools. The significance of PDAs went beyond simple convenience. They introduced habits that are now deeply embedded in modern life. Checking digital calendars, storing contacts electronically, taking quick notes, accessing information on the go. These actions are everyday routines now, but PDAs were the first devices to make them possible outside of a computer. They bridged the gap between analog organization and the digital future, preparing millions of people for the transition toward mobile computing. For a time, PDAs represented the peak of personal productivity. Their small size made them easy to carry, and their specialized software focused entirely on helping users stay organized. But this specialization also became a limitation. As the early 2000s progressed, the world began to demand more from portable devices. People wanted phones that could do more than make calls and send texts. They wanted email, browsers, multimedia, and tools that blended communication with organization. PDAs, built mostly for tasks rather than entertainment or communication, struggled to evolve quickly enough. The turning point came with the rise of smartphones. At first, these devices merely borrowed ideas from PDAs, adding calendars and contact lists to mobile phones. But as technology advanced, smartphones absorbed everything PDAs offered and expanded even further. They combined communication, productivity, media, and internet access into a single device. The stylus-driven interfaces of PDAs were replaced by touchscreens that responded to the swipe of a finger. Suddenly, carrying both a phone and a PDA no longer made sense. The arrival of the first iPhone marked the beginning of the end for PDAs. It introduced a seamless, intuitive interface and a unified ecosystem of apps. Overnight, the concept of a separate digital assistant became unnecessary. People embraced the convenience of having all their tools in one device, and PDAs rapidly disappeared from the mainstream. Companies that once dominated the PDA market either shifted their focus or vanished entirely. What had once seemed essential became obsolete almost instantly. Yet, PDAs left a lasting imprint on modern technology. They laid the foundation for mobile computing, influencing everything from smartphone design to app-based productivity systems. Many of the ideas that defined PDAs, portable calendars, digital note-taking, mobile information storage, became core features of today's devices. Even the stylus, once considered outdated, returned in new forms through tablets and hybrid devices, proving that the concepts introduced by PDAs still resonate, even in different forms. Today, PDAs exist mostly as relics of an earlier digital era. They appear in old drawers, tech collections, and nostalgic memories of people who once relied on them daily. Holding one now reveals how far mobile technology has progressed, but it also reminds us of a time when the future felt compact, deliberate, and full of possibility. These small devices paved the way for the smartphones that dominate modern life, acting as stepping stones between the world of desktop computers and the era of constant connectivity. Though no longer used, PDAs played a crucial role in shaping the mindset of mobile productivity. They encouraged people to trust digital tools, depend on portable information, and imagine technology not as a machine on a desk, but as something that could fit effortlessly into a pocket. Their legacy remains quietly embedded in every touch, swipe, reminder, and digital note that defines life today. Pagers. In the quiet evolution of communication, few devices captured the tension between immediacy and limitation as vividly as the pager. For decades, it was a lifeline, a small and simple object that kept people connected in ways that felt both urgent and intimate. Long before smartphones delivered endless notifications and constant connectivity, pagers created a world of selective attention. A buzz, a beep, or a brief numeric code could carry vital information across cities, countries, or even continents. For those who relied on them, a pager represented responsibility, trust, and an invisible link to the world beyond. The first pagers appeared in the mid-20th century, initially as one-way devices that could only receive a signal. Hospitals, emergency services, and large organizations adopted them quickly, recognizing their value in coordinating people efficiently. Doctors carried pagers to respond to emergencies, technicians used them to reach specialists, and businesses relied on them for rapid communication. Unlike phones, pagers could not be ignored entirely. They demanded attention when the signal arrived. The immediacy of the message, paired with the simplicity of the device, created a sense of control and connectivity that was revolutionary at the time. Throughout the 1980s and 1990s, pagers became increasingly compact, sophisticated, and widely used. Numeric pagers delivered phone numbers or short messages, while alphanumeric models allowed brief texts and instructions. Some could even store multiple messages, acting as early digital notepads. The devices were small enough to clip to a belt or slip into a pocket, yet powerful enough to reach the right person at the right time. The very design of the pager encouraged attentiveness and economy. Messages had to be short, clear, and meaningful, cultivating a communication style unlike any other. The cultural impact of pagers extended beyond professional use. For some, especially teenagers and young adults in the 1990s, pagers became symbols of independence and subtle social status. Carrying one suggested responsibility, connectivity, and belonging to a network of people who expected your attention. The beep of a pager could generate anticipation, signaling a message that might change plans, convey urgent news, or simply confirm that someone was thinking of you. In a world without constant voice calls or instant messaging, the pager created an entirely new rhythm for staying in touch. Yet pagers existed within clear constraints. They were primarily one-way, meaning the recipient could not immediately respond through the same device. Messages were brief, and interpretation depended entirely on the recipient's understanding. Unlike modern communication, there was no multimedia, no attachments, no group messaging. The technology demanded discipline, both in sending and receiving messages. In many ways, it fostered a more intentional relationship with communication, a sharp contrast to the endless, often overwhelming stream of notifications today. The decline of pagers was gradual but decisive. The rise of mobile phones, capable of two-way calls, text messages, and eventually email and apps, began to eclipse the pager's role. Devices that combined portability with comprehensive communication capabilities offered convenience that pagers could not match. By the early 2000s, most businesses and individuals had migrated to mobile phones, leaving the pager as a specialized tool for medical professionals and certain industries that required instant, reliable alerts. Even in these niches, the pager eventually began to fade. Hospitals replaced them with secure smartphone applications and networked alert systems. Businesses transitioned to unified communication platforms. The beeps and vibrations that once punctuated daily life grew quieter and rarer. The physical pager became a relic, a quiet reminder of a time when connectivity was deliberate, focused, and governed by the limits of a small, resilient device. Yet the legacy of the pager remains significant. It introduced people to the concept of mobile, personal communication, shaping habits and expectations for instant alerts and rapid responses. It showed the value of being reachable yet selective, of receiving important information without the noise of continuous channels. And in its simplicity, it captured a balance that modern devices sometimes struggle to maintain. A clarity of purpose, a single function performed exceptionally well. Today, pagers exist mostly in memory, displayed in museums or kept as nostalgic objects. Their impact, however, is still felt in the design of notification systems, mobile alerts, and messaging apps. They stand as quiet witnesses to an era when staying connected required patience, discipline, and attention. In the story of communication technology, pagers represent a pivotal moment, a bridge between immobile, landline dependence and the boundless, immediate networks that define life today. Though obsolete, their presence endures as a reminder of how even the smallest devices can shape the way we relate to one another and the world around us. Overhead projectors. In classrooms, meeting rooms, and lecture halls of the late 20th century, the overhead projector quietly held a central role in shaping how people shared information. Unlike books, blackboards, or early computers, this device allowed knowledge to move from one mind to many in a visible, immediate way. Its presence was both practical and ritualistic, a machine that projected ideas, diagrams, and words onto a screen for collective attention. For decades, the overhead projector served as a bridge between individual preparation and public presentation, linking the teacher, presenter, or lecturer with the audience in a tangible, almost physical way. The design of the overhead projector was simple yet deliberate. A flat glass surface held transparent sheets marked with text or diagrams. Beneath the glass, a bright light illuminated the content. A mirror and lens assembly then directed the enlarged image onto a screen at the front of a room. The simplicity of its mechanics belied the power of its function. With a stack of transparencies and a marker pen, a person could create complex lessons, diagrams, or presentations that were instantly visible to dozens, sometimes hundreds, of people at once. The act of placing a sheet on the glass, adjusting the focus, and turning on the light became a quiet, methodical ritual, a performance of knowledge made tangible. Throughout the 1970s, 1980s, and 1990s, overhead projectors dominated teaching and professional presentations. They were durable, reliable, and forgiving, able to operate in a variety of environments. Teachers used them to trace diagrams, highlight equations, or guide discussions with step-by-step illustrations. Business professionals employed them to display charts, sales reports, and complex data, communicating ideas in a structured, visually clear manner. Unlike early computer screens, which were small and inaccessible to groups, the overhead projector made information collective. It allowed everyone in the room to see exactly what the presenter intended. The overhead projector also shaped the way people created content. Writing on a transparency required precision and clarity, as every line, diagram, and annotation was magnified for the audience. Mistakes were visible, but they could also be corrected quickly with an erasable marker. The device encouraged a deliberate pacing of information, one slide, one diagram, one concept at a time. In classrooms, it guided lessons, controlling the flow of discussion. In offices, it structured meetings, allowing participants to follow the presenter's reasoning in real time. Its presence dictated rhythm, focus, and a shared understanding of the material being conveyed. Yet, as the world moved into the digital age, the overhead projector began to face limitations. Its reliance on physical transparencies made preparation time-consuming. Updating information meant printing or writing new sheets. The device lacked the interactivity, color depth, and versatility offered by computers and digital projectors. Presenters could not easily integrate video, dynamic charts, or multimedia into their displays. As expectations for flexibility and visual richness grew, the overhead projector's static, analog format began to feel restrictive. By the early 2000s, digital projectors and presentation software had begun to replace the overhead projector in classrooms and conference rooms. Devices that could connect directly to computers allowed slides to be created, edited, and displayed instantly, offering animation, color, and multimedia capabilities impossible with transparent sheets. The physical act of handling transparencies became obsolete, and the soft, warm glow of the overhead projector faded from lecture halls. Equipment once essential for teaching and professional communication was relegated to storage rooms, forgotten closets, and the occasional museum exhibit. Yet the influence of overhead projectors persists in subtle ways. They introduced a generation to the concept of large-scale visual presentation, teaching people how to structure information for clarity and impact. They emphasized pacing, focus, and the importance of making ideas visible to others. Many of the techniques developed for writing and organizing transparencies, clear headings, concise diagrams, stepwise explanations, have been carried into modern digital presentations. The rhythm and care once demanded by these analog devices inform how content is displayed, explained, and received even in today's virtual classrooms and online meetings. In hindsight, the overhead projector occupies a quiet but significant space in the history of technology. It bridged the gap between handwritten notes and digital slides, between intimate instruction and collective comprehension. Its presence shaped habits of attention, methods of communication, and the expectations of both teachers and audiences. Though rarely seen today, replaced by sleek projectors and interactive screens, the overhead projector's legacy endures as a symbol of a time when visual communication required preparation, deliberation, and a careful physical interaction with the material. To encounter an overhead projector now is to glimpse an era when knowledge moved slowly, deliberately, and tangibly across rooms. The soft hum of its lamp, the careful placement of a transparency, and the shared gaze of an audience formed a ritual of learning and communication now largely forgotten. Yet those who experienced it carry with them an understanding of clarity, focus, and the tactile engagement of presenting ideas, lessons that live on quietly in the age of digital projection. Wired landline phones. For much of the 20th century, the wired landline phone was a quiet constant in households, offices, and public spaces. It occupied a unique place in the rhythm of daily life, connecting people across cities, countries, and continents with a simple twist of copper wires. The act of picking up a receiver, listening to the dial tone, and speaking across distance was both ordinary and remarkable. Each call carried intention, a deliberate choice to reach out, to hear another person's voice, to share news, plans, or comfort. In a world before instant messaging, social media, and smartphones, the landline phone served as the lifeline of personal and professional connection. The technology behind the wired phone was deceptively complex. Electrical signals traveled through an intricate network of copper cables, central offices, and exchanges, converting the human voice into electrical pulses, and then back again. The clarity of early long-distance connections amazed many, allowing conversations that once required physical travel to occur instantly. Over time, the design of the phones themselves became an icon of familiarity: corded receivers, rotary dials, push buttons, and eventually features such as caller ID, speed dial, and answering machines. Each innovation extended the usefulness of a device that had become essential to everyday life. For families, landline phones were anchors of communication. Children learned to dial numbers, parents coordinated schedules, and friends exchanged news in real time. Phones were often shared objects, placed in a central location in the home, with conversations heard through walls, and the presence of ringing signaling a moment of attention for all. In offices, wired phones enabled coordination across teams, departments, and even continents, creating the networks of business and industry that drove much of modern society. Every conversation was tangible, bound by the physical connection of the network and the deliberate action of lifting a receiver. The landline phone also shaped social rituals. People became accustomed to specific times for calls, developing a rhythm of contact that reflected schedules, availability, and courtesy. Messages were often left for absent family members, and answering machines became early repositories of personal and professional history. There was a certain patience and deliberation inherent in these interactions. Calls were structured, limited by time, and often carefully considered before placing. Unlike today's constant digital stream, each conversation had weight, significance, and immediacy. Yet even the most enduring technologies face change. The rise of mobile phones in the late 20th century began a slow erosion of the landline's centrality. Mobile devices offered freedom, carrying communication into pockets, handbags, and briefcases. Calls could occur anywhere, anytime, without being tethered to a wall or a single location. The convenience and flexibility of mobile phones appeal to households, professionals, and young people growing up in increasingly connected environments. The wired phone, once indispensable, began to feel stationary, limited, and increasingly anachronistic. The decline accelerated as smartphones emerged in the 2000s. With texting, email, and apps integrating messaging into a single, portable device, the wired phone's role became minimal. Households increasingly opted to remove landlines, relying entirely on mobile coverage. Businesses, too, transitioned to digital systems that combined voice, video, and messaging into unified platforms. The landline phone, once a centerpiece of communication, was quietly relegated to a backup role or disappeared entirely from modern households. Despite its fading relevance, the legacy of the wired landline phone endures. It established the foundational expectations of reliability, clarity, and permanence in communication. It shaped how people learned to speak over distance, to wait for responses, and to navigate social conventions of availability and attention. Its simple presence, a receiver, a cord, and a dial tone, formed a tactile and auditory connection to the larger network of human interaction. Many who grew up with landlines still remember the sound of the bell, the weight of the receiver, and the ritual of picking up the phone to connect with someone far away. Today, landline phones survive primarily in specific contexts. Businesses that require secure, stable lines, rural areas with unreliable mobile coverage, or households that prefer the reliability of wired connection. Museums and collections display older models as historical artifacts, reminding us of a time when communication required presence, action, and attention. In a sense, the wired phone represents a different pace of life, one defined by deliberation, focus, and the tangible act of reaching out to another human being. The story of the wired landline phone is one of quiet endurance and gradual obsolescence. It teaches us about the evolution of connection, the shift from shared household communication to personal, portable interaction, and the way technology shapes human behavior. Though largely replaced, its influence continues to echo in our expectations of clarity, reliability, and accessibility in modern communication. The landline may no longer dominate, but it remains a cornerstone in the history of how people learn to connect across distances, forming the foundation upon which mobile and digital communication would later flourish. Dial-up internet. In the early days of connecting to the digital world, dial-up internet represented both promise and patience. Before high-speed broadband, fiber optics, and wireless networks, it was the primary gateway for millions of people to explore the internet. The process of connecting was deliberate. Lifting a phone receiver, hearing the soft hum of a modem, and listening to the symphony of beeps, whistles, and static tones as the device established its link to a remote server. For many, these sounds became a familiar part of daily life, a ritual signaling access to a vast and previously unimaginable universe of information, communication, and exploration. Dial-up internet emerged in the 1980s and gained widespread popularity in the 1990s. It operated by using standard telephone lines to transmit digital data as analog signals. This meant that the same wires that carried a family's voice conversation could also carry email, early web pages, and data from bulletin board systems. The modem, a small box connected to a computer, transformed these signals, allowing users to navigate text-based websites, chat with distant friends, or access online services for banking, shopping, and research. Every connection required attention and a willingness to embrace patience, for the process could be slow, unpredictable, and occasionally frustrating. The limitations of dial-up were evident to anyone who used it regularly. Speeds were measured in kilobits per second, a fraction of what modern networks deliver effortlessly. Opening a single web page could take several minutes, images appeared line by line, and simultaneous use of the telephone line was impossible without additional equipment. Despite these constraints, dial-up introduced millions to the concept of instant access to a global network. It required careful management of time, a sense of anticipation, and an appreciation for the fragile bridge it created between the user and the world. For households, the arrival of dial-up brought significant changes. Computers, once mostly offline tools, suddenly became portals to distant places. Children used early educational programs, teenagers joined online chat rooms, and adults explored news, shopping, and email. Family routines adapted around the technology, negotiating usage schedules when phone lines were shared, and learning to coordinate online activities with the rhythms of daily life. The modem's distinctive sounds, a mixture of static and negotiation between devices, became an auditory symbol of new horizons opening. Dial-up also shaped early internet culture. Forums, bulletin boards, and chat services fostered communities connected solely by digital signals transmitted through copper lines. People learned new forms of communication, relying on text, emoticons, and limited multimedia to express ideas. In professional contexts, dial-up enabled early forms of remote work, digital collaboration, and access to information that had previously required physical presence. It represented the first widespread, democratized access to a networked world, transforming how knowledge, culture, and communication flowed. Yet dial-up was inherently constrained. Its reliance on telephone lines meant it was tethered, slow, and susceptible to disruptions. The growing demands of multimedia content, images, videos, interactive websites, quickly exceeded its capacity. Even as technologies like DSL and cable emerged, offering faster and more reliable connections, dial-up lingered for those without alternatives, often in rural or underserved areas. Its decline was gradual, marked by the adoption of broadband, fiber optics, and eventually wireless networks that rendered the once essential ritual of waiting for a connection nearly obsolete. The eventual obsolescence of dial-up internet is a story of rapid technological evolution. Broadband connections offered speeds measured in megabits per second, eliminating the hours previously spent downloading files or waiting for web pages to render. Wireless networks untethered users from specific locations, allowing access anywhere, anytime. Devices became more versatile, combining browsing, communication, and media consumption in ways unimaginable during the dial-up era. Today, most households view dial-up as an artifact of a simpler, slower digital age. Yet the legacy of dial-up internet endures in subtle ways. It introduced the world to the possibility of remote connection, online communities, and the digital economy. It taught patience, adaptation, and the value of every bit of transmitted information. The auditory experience of the modem's handshake, once routine, is now an icon of technological transition, a sound that evokes curiosity, exploration, and the cautious optimism of early digital pioneers. In retrospect, dial-up internet represents a critical bridge between offline life and the fully connected modern world. Though it is largely obsolete, its influence remains embedded in the habits, expectations, and understanding of digital connectivity. It reminds us that the journey to instant, ubiquitous access was not sudden, but built on years of deliberate engagement, patience, and the quiet hum of a modem negotiating a connection between one small device and the vast network of human knowledge. CD and DVD drives in laptops. For decades, laptops were celebrated for their portability, yet they retained a feature that connected them to a tangible physical world of media: the CD and DVD drive. This small, tray-loading mechanism allowed users to access music, movies, software, and data with a simple click of a button. In an era before cloud storage and high-speed internet, these drives were essential. They transformed laptops into multifunctional tools for work, entertainment, and learning, bridging the gap between the digital and physical realms. Through them, entire libraries, applications, and personal collections were accessible in the palm of a hand, wherever one traveled. The CD drive emerged first, bringing digital audio into a portable, easily transportable format. Music could now be stored, shared, and played without the need for cassettes or analog media. Soon after, DVD drives expanded possibilities, offering high-capacity storage for movies, software, and large data files. Laptops became capable of reading, writing, and even burning disks, turning them into personal archives, entertainment systems, and tools of creation. These drives represented a balance between portability and functionality, allowing users to carry knowledge, media, and personal content without relying on constant internet access. Throughout the 1990s and early 2000s, CD and DVD drives were ubiquitous in laptops. Their presence shaped how people interacted with software, media, and personal data. Applications were distributed on disks, movies were watched at home or on the go, and music collections became digital yet tangible entities. The act of inserting a disc, waiting for it to load, and watching the content appear on the screen became a familiar ritual. Drives were often silent companions, quietly spinning while users worked, learned, or entertained themselves. They gave laptops a depth of functionality that went beyond screen size and processing power. Yet these drives had limitations inherent to their design. They were mechanical, requiring moving parts that could wear down over time. Disks were fragile, susceptible to scratches, and needed careful handling. Capacity, while impressive for the time, was fixed and finite. Sharing data or media often required physical transfer, which could be slow and cumbersome compared to modern cloud-based solutions. Nonetheless, for a generation of users, these limitations were part of the rhythm of engagement, a structured way of interacting with digital content that demanded intentionality and care. As the 2000s progressed, the relevance of CD and DVD drives began to decline. The rise of broadband internet, cloud storage, USB flash drives, and external hard drives offered more convenience, higher capacity, and instant access. Digital downloads replaced the need for physical media. Music streaming, software distribution through online platforms, and video-on-demand services rendered disks largely redundant. The tray loading drive, once an essential component of a portable computer, gradually became optional, then unnecessary, as laptops grew thinner, lighter, and more reliant on wireless connectivity. Manufacturers responded to these changes by phasing out internal drives, prioritizing battery life, weight reduction, and slimmer designs. By the mid-2010s, many consumer laptops no longer included CD or DVD drives, signaling the end of an era. External drives remained available for those who needed them, but their presence in mainstream devices became increasingly rare. The once ubiquitous feature that allowed users to engage with tangible media became a nostalgic footnote in the history of portable computing. Despite their obsolescence, CD and DVD drives hold a quiet legacy. They represent a transitional period when digital content remained physical, and when the act of inserting a disc carried a sense of ceremony and control. They shaped habits of media consumption, software installation, and personal archiving, and they introduced a generation to the idea that digital content could be owned, curated, and stored outside of a network. These drives bridged the analog and digital worlds, providing a tactile experience in an increasingly intangible environment. Today, CD and DVD drives are largely absent from laptops, yet they remain symbols of a period when technology demanded deliberate interaction and physical engagement. They remind us that portability once had boundaries, and that access to media was once something one carried, held, and managed with care. Their story illustrates how quickly convenience, connectivity, and cloud-based solutions can render a technology obsolete. Yet even in obsolescence, their impact continues to resonate in the ways people interact with media, store data, and understand the evolution of portable computing. Blackberry phones. In the early 2000s, the Blackberry phone emerged as a symbol of professional productivity and digital connection. Unlike conventional mobile phones, which focused primarily on voice calls and basic texting, Blackberry devices offered a suite of tools designed to manage work, communication, and organization in a portable form. Email access, calendars, contacts, and a tactile physical keyboard were combined into a single handheld device. For executives, entrepreneurs, and increasingly broader audiences, Blackberry phones represented efficiency, control, and immediacy, a compact digital office that could fit in a pocket. Blackberry's influence on professional life was profound. Before the era of fully capable smartphones, Blackberry users could respond to emails in real time, manage tasks, and coordinate teams from virtually anywhere. The company's emphasis on secure, reliable communication made the devices particularly appealing to businesses and government agencies. The familiar click-clack of the keyboard became synonymous with productivity, and the phones were often treated as indispensable companions for anyone whose life revolved around constant connectivity. For a time, owning a Blackberry conferred status, suggesting both technological savviness and professional commitment. The design of the BlackBerry was both practical and purposeful. Small screens, precise physical keys, and the iconic trackball or later optical trackpad made navigating messages intuitive. The focus was on speed and accuracy of communication, rather than multimedia or entertainment. Push email services ensured that users never missed important messages, while secure servers protected sensitive data. These features created a rhythm of work in motion, where emails could be addressed instantly and decisions could be made without returning to a desktop computer. BlackBerry phones blurred the boundary between office and personal life, and for many, that blurred line defined a new era of mobile work. Yet the very strengths of the BlackBerry would eventually contribute to its decline. The rise of smartphones with touchscreens, app ecosystems, and integrated multimedia capabilities expanded what a mobile device could do. Apple's iPhone and devices running Android offered cameras, web browsing, music, video, and a vast array of applications, combining productivity with entertainment and social interaction. BlackBerry's focus on secure email and tactile keyboards, once its defining advantage, became a limitation in a market that increasingly valued versatility, connectivity, and user experience over specialized tools. The shift was dramatic. Consumer preferences moved toward devices that could serve multiple purposes seamlessly, replacing the single-function or limited-function phone. BlackBerry attempted to adapt, introducing touchscreen models and an app store, but it was too late. The smartphone ecosystem had already defined itself, and the advantages of BlackBerry's platform were overshadowed by the convenience and creativity offered by competitors. Users who had once depended on BlackBerry for email, messaging, and mobile productivity gradually migrated to devices that could do everything the BlackBerry could, and much more. Despite its decline, BlackBerry's legacy is enduring. It defined mobile work in the early 21st century, shaping the expectation that communication could be immediate, secure, and portable. The device taught people to trust mobile platforms for professional use and influenced the design and security features of subsequent smartphones. The culture of responding to emails on the go, of constant professional availability, and of integrating work into daily life was cemented in part by the widespread adoption of BlackBerry devices. Today, BlackBerry phones are largely absent from mainstream use, relegated to collectors, enthusiasts, and specialized professional contexts that still value their security features. Yet the impact of these devices remains embedded in modern mobile culture. They serve as reminders of a period when mobile communication became indispensable, when productivity was transformed by the ability to carry an office in a pocket, and when the pace of professional life began to accelerate in ways that would define the decades to come. The story of BlackBerry phones illustrates both innovation and impermanence. For a time, they were at the pinnacle of mobile technology, shaping professional communication and creating a new rhythm of work. Yet as technology advanced, they became a quiet artifact of an era that demanded specialized tools, giving way to more versatile devices that promised everything in one. In this sense, BlackBerry exemplifies the evolution of mobile technology. A device that defined a moment, influenced countless users, and ultimately became a symbol of how quickly innovation can shift, leaving even the most celebrated tools to the quiet dignity of obsolescence. Ending. As we reach the end of our journey through technologies that have become obsolete, it is fascinating to reflect on how each device, once indispensable, shaped the way we lived, worked, and connected with the world. From floppy disks to BlackBerry phones, these tools carried with them purpose, innovation, and a vision of the future that now belongs to history. They remind us of the constant evolution of technology, and how quickly the devices we rely on can move from essential to obsolete. If you enjoyed this exploration, please take a moment to like this video. Your support helps create more stories like these. Consider subscribing to stay updated with our meditative journeys through science, history, and technology. Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us which device you remember using most, or which one you think had the biggest impact. And if you know someone who would enjoy this video, feel free to share it with them.